No Buzz, Just Bees Book Club. Um, Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. This is a paperback because it's an advanced reader copy that I've had for the better part of a year and that I read the better part of a month ago. Oops. I quite liked it. I've never sat with an entire Naomi Klein book before. Never actually gone through the No Logo or the Shock Doctrine. Have read excerpts and articles from her and generally found her to be perceptive and interesting as a writer. And then Doppelganger came out, and it's a real good, interesting idea. And I was like, maybe I'll read it, and then I did, and now I've read it. It is about her confusion with her being confused with Naomi Wolf over the last handful of decades, and how that spiraled completely out of control, especially during COVID, both in terms of people doing it and also her disidentification with Wolf's politics, and how that was maybe always somewhat the case, and also just Naomi Wolf diving into the deep end and becoming a regular guest on Steve Bannon's podcast, thing I've never really thought about before, but I'm sure that makes a ton of sense that that guy would have one of those. And it's also, it sort of dips in and out of the literary history of doppelgangers, and sort of, touches on there's a good amount of sort of the whole psychoanalysis, specifically Freud's thoughts about doppelgangers and things like that. And I don't the stuff about doppelgangers, both literarily and psychoanalytically, I think is useful sort of ground level work that happens in the book. I don't think it's like I don't think it's like a brilliant study of the doppelganger throughout, representations and analytic tools, but it's like some groundwork that is appreciated. But the meat of the thing is sort of digging into the what Klein refers to as the mirror world, where you know what is the term? Horizontalism? No, not horizontalism. Diagonalism is a thing he talks about a lot, where during sort of shock doctrine-esque crisis moments, there is a tendency for far-right political movements to sort of bounce out of not just far-right spaces, but sort of a diagonal slice of the left and right. And this is sort of where she's positioning Wolf as being in, as this like high profile feminist for the last 40 years, who is now allying with fascist. I was going to say proto-fascist, but definitely not crypto-fascist at this point, but just fascist right-wing movements. And I think that stuff is really good, and I think the thing that ultimately I took away from this book was that I was impressed with Klein's handling of COVID and Israel, which were two things that are big aspects of this book, and that I was worried were going to be as shittily handled as they are pretty much everywhere. But they're not, and I don't think she's maybe quite as hard on those things as I myself am, and that's wrong, but it's okay, because I'm right about things. This is what I'm saying. I'm right about things, and other people can only approach my own understanding, which is the truth of things. That's how the world works. Yes. Right, B? Thank you. Yeah. There's I don't know. I don't know that I have a lot to very specifically say. I appreciated, even in this advanced reader copy. I'm sure it's much more sort of fully done in the final text, but very thorough even if they are in some ways sort of placeholder notes section. So like the citational apparatus is there. The citations are real. It is not just like her talking shit. She is citing her sources, and they are not just a bunch of YouTube videos or whatever. And then the other thing is how the book sort of ends is really interesting, because Klein sort of talks about how she has some questions she would love to ask Naomi Wolf, and one of those questions is, "Do you remember me?" And she sort of talks about her first encounter with Naomi Wolf, and it was like her reading the beauty myth in college, and like her seeing Naomi Wolf and going like, "Oh, I could do this too. I could be a writer who talks about important things," but also being like, there's kind of a liberalism to the beauty myth that was always there, that she sort of unpacks, and she doesn't fishhook theory the thing, but I think that's sort of part of what's going on here, as much as the diagonalism is her sort of chosen provenance. That there was always something a little less radical about Naomi Wolf than she was positioned as in the 80s, when she was the big feminist name at the time. I've not read any of Naomi Wolf's books, and they don't sell, so I don't really have to think about her ever, except for when I was reading this book. And then I was thinking about, well, not really about her, but about other stuff. Oh, I had a note in here somewhere. Let's see. I shouldn't just flip through a book. I should be talking, because that's like the medium. Yeah. Where did I write in pencil on this? I theoretically could cut this out, but then yeah. So this is like just a good little passage about pandemics that I will presumably, sorry, to finish that thought, I could cut that out, but then I would have to use editing software. I just don't feel like it. This is no buzz. It's just for bees. It's a Just Bees book club, you know? I guess it starts a little earlier than that. Right, this is Naomi Wolf canvassing with her husband. Whoops, I did it! Naomi Klein canvassing with her husband. The people Avi and I met, and I were meeting at the extreme end of the spectrum, didn't seem to deny COVID outright. Rather, they cast the virus as a kind of cleansing or culling of the herd, with some mixing in eco-fascist beliefs and imagining the pandemic as a means by which the natural world would be rehabilitated from human stresses. This line of thought was rampant in the early days of lockdown, when the earth is healing and we are the virus memes overran the internet, along with videos, plenty of them faked, of wild animals taking back our ghostly cities and towns. But now the embrace of a certain amount of human death was becoming more overt, and explicitly linked to opposing the vaccines. At around this time, Rob Schmidt, a former Fox News host who had moved over to Newsmax, mused on air, quote, "I feel like a vaccination, in a weird way, is just generally kind of going against nature. Like, I mean, if there is some disease out there, maybe there's just an ebb and flow to life where something's supposed to wipe out a certain amount of people, and that's just kind of the way evolution goes. Vaccines kind of stand in the way of that." I read that to get to this part, which is, I think this is the move that Klein does consistently throughout Doppelganger that I really appreciated, where she doesn't just like stand out as an example, like here's how people got shitty, and then we're going back. That's the end of that quote. So we're back to Naomi Klein's voice. "These are ideas with blood-soaked histories in the Americas, reaching back to the stories European conquerors and colonists told about how the infectious diseases that ravaged indigenous populations, already weakened after settlers stole their land and decimated their food sources, were actually God's handiwork, a divine sign that these continents were meant for white Christians. Quote, 'A wonderful plague' is how King James of England described pandemics in the 1620 Charter of New England. Quote, 'Almighty God, in his great goodness and bounty towards us, had sent it among the savages.' End quote. In 1634, John Winthrop, the first governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, described the disease that tore through the native Algonquin-speaking peoples in similar terms. Quote, "But for the natives in these parts, God hath so pursued them, as for 300 miles space the greatest part of them are swept away by smallpox, which still continues among them. So as God hath thereby cleared, so as God hath thereby declared, so as God hath thereby cleared our title to this place." End quote. In 1707, the former Carolina governor John Archdale also cast mass deaths as heaven sent, writing of, quote, "the Indians," end quote, that, quote, it pleased Almighty God to send unusual sicknesses among them, such as the smallpox, etc., to lessen their numbers, so that the English, in comparison to the Spaniard, have but little Indian blood to answer for. End quote. This was not true. There was plenty of blood to answer for, and disease was only one of many killers in these waves of genocide. But the idea that pandemics are carrying out the work of a greater power, whether that power is imagined as God or as nature, is integral to the origin myth of the modern world. This is why I say, I mean, this is the whole thing, right? This is what I'm saying. She's pretty good on the pandemic, and she's pretty good on the question of genocide, because she handles them historically and cites her sources, and it just it's it's a book that has that takes things seriously and thinks through them, and I like reading those sometimes. Anyway, thanks for not watching.